Shake, 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 Sinora, shake it all the time.
When you add a shake of Frank's Red Hot, you open a world of better. A world where wings bring out the flavor of game day any day. Where buffalo chicken dip takes any party up a notch. And where any slice of pizza instantly becomes the world's best slice of pizza. At least until the next slice. Bring every bite to life with the perfect blend of flavor and heat. Frank's Red Hot. I put that shit on everything.
Guys, welcome to the Bird Brain Podcast, where the goal is to rise above it all, stay elevated, create that infinity, and up you. I'm your host, Isaiah, and today we are talking about the good grief. Mourning relationships, ending, and not even like mourning the passing of a person, but just mourning the experience. I think it's so important to identify things that come to an end. Even if the person still is alive, or even if the thing, like you lose things. There's so many things happen in life, in our waking life, in our moment to moment, that we don't necessarily give our full attention or acknowledgement to. And it shows up in our life still. So today we're going to talk about that. And if you like what you're listening to, head on over to iTunes, comment, subscribe, leave a rating, leave a review. Tell the world what you like about the podcast. And I appreciate you guys who have done just that. And it's appreciated. It means a lot. And it's been helping the podcast out. More listeners, more ears, more hearts come to this place. And that's a big deal. If you want to support the podcast, head on over to patreon.com. Shout out to the new patrons. Appreciate you guys and welcome. And if you want to get Bird Brain merch, head on over to the Bird Brain shop. The t-shirts that are up there now, you'll see them on the featured. Those are limited edition, so those are not going to be here by the end of the month. And so far, they've been running pretty quick. So if you haven't checked it out, give it a look and get one of your own. It's a 3-year anniversary podcast t-shirt, limited edition, illustrated and drawn and designed by your own. And yeah, they're cool. It's just something a little bit different. And yeah, I think that's it for the homework. So again, grab yourself some water, take a deep breath, grab a notepad if you need to. If you're driving, well, make sure you're wearing your damn seatbelt. And let's just go along for the ride. All right, stay tuned. Guys, what's up? How are you beautiful people doing today? How's your heart? How's your head? Where have your thoughts been lately? Are you happy? You're indifferent? You're in limbo? You're upset? Something happened. What's the tea? And it's okay to ask yourself questions. And I want to remind you guys is like, it's okay to be happy. Give yourself permission to be happy in moments, and also give yourself permission to not be okay in the very next moment. Like, you do not have to remain in one state of being at all times. And that applies to, sadness and despair. Like, you don't have to stay there. You know what I'm saying? And if it lasts a little bit longer, hey, it's all good. But just remind yourself, I don't have to stay here. Okay? Just wanted to put that out there. It's also my mom's birthday, so a special little shout out to Mama Dukes. Mama, happy birthday, lady. It's Leo season for all you guys out there. Happy birthday to all those Leos out there. You guys shine bright as always. So, yeah, little love for the Mama Dukes. And, yeah, I was thinking about this particular thing last week or for a couple of weeks now. So I don't know what necessarily brought it up for me. I'm not sure. I think it was a couple of things, and then I thought about it a little bit deeper. So first off, mourning, or grief, it usually applies to when somebody passes. It's usually associated with only a proper burial, et cetera, et cetera. That's it. And you have time to mourn, you have time to grieve. And then you move past it. You move past the physical thing, but there's still feeling sometimes that lingers, depending on the person in the relationship. But in our waking lives, when something ends, do we still allow a grieving process? And I could almost bet 9 times out of 10, the answer is no. It's not something that's really given the proper attention that it deserves. And interestingly enough, it's a lot to take in when you're grieving the ending of a relationship and the person still exists. Maybe they still exist in your life to some capacity, or, they're just in your cipher. And, with social media, there's two things. You see a lot, or at least I see a lot. There's always, I see so many damn quotes about relationships. I see so many people talking about relationships, but not in a way that it's a little bit more in depth. Like there's these little quips, about relationships and yada, 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 but there's no real in-depth process or attention given to the actual components of a relationship. Does that make sense? And I'm not just talking about romantic relationships. I'm talking about friendships too. Like friendships, I feel like people downplay how impactful friendships are. But if you think about it, between your family and romantic relationships, friendships are usually the first relationships you develop outside of your parents. And they usually have a heavier influence than your parents sometimes. You spend a lot of time with your friends, right? Their relationships built. There's a level of intimacy there. All the components of what makes a relationship what it is. And when a friendship ends, or when a friendship just feels weird, we all feel it. That's the thing. And I see it on TV shows a lot too. There's starting to become this interested awareness about the intricacies of a friendship. And when it ends, it hits. If the friendship matters, it's going to affect you. Or if the friendship gets different, it's going to affect you. And what do you do with that? There's not necessarily a talk about the impact of those relationships, right? Even mourning family relationships, you disconnect yourself from a family member. It's necessary. And people are always like, oh, that's your family. Because somebody has a title in your life does not give them immunity to how they are allowed to treat you, or it does not necessarily give immunity to them being human and humans being capable of doing things. Or maybe you did something, not just putting it on the other person all the time. There's a level of accountability we have in our relationships, right? So whenever a relationship ends, it hits, or take it off a relationship. My plant died last year. It was my first plant that I bought for my birthday, and it wasn't just like, oh, the plant just died. It got sick. It became very unhealthy, and it was my fault because I was overwatering the plant, right? And the conditions weren't the best. And it was a snake plant, so it was low maintenance. But I was doing my best to sustain it and trying to make sure I was doing my due diligence, making sure I watered. It was my first plant. I was a parent. And what happened is that I watched it slowly die. And I tried my best to revive it and make sure it was good. And no dice. And that bothered me. It really bothered me because this was important to me. And this was something that I watched grow, right? And when it died, I tried to revive it. I did all the work to try to keep it alive, and it died. And some people are like, it's just a plant. But I think when something matters to you, it's okay to let it matter to you because there's information there when you give it awareness. Earlier, a couple of weeks ago, actually, my fish died. And I was in the middle of training a client and I had to deal with that. And, shout out to my client. She's a friend of mine too, Mal. She was cool about it. She's like, she was like, you need to handle it right now. I was like, ooh, it'd just be good to just kind of like get this taken care of so I could focus. She was like, go do your thing. And then I had to just jump right back into training. And for me, I didn't want to, I was like, all right, so let's just do this. Let's just get into it. Let's just train, we'll do our thing. And, feeling the need to just jump and ignore it and try to move like it never happened. And it's like, why? Why do we do that? Because we don't want to make somebody else feel uncomfortable. Granted, she wasn't uncomfortable. She was totally understanding. But for me, and I'm sure for a lot of you guys, we don't allow things to process. A couple weeks ago, I talked about the reset, right? When something like that happens, we don't necessarily always give it our full attention. And it's a fish, so it's like, oh, well, it's just a fish. You could get another one. That's not the point. This is a fish that I invested in. And this was actually a fish that I didn't even intend to have. It was, I ended up taking care of it because a mutual friend, their friends needed somebody to watch the fish, or whatever. I was like, I'll just take it, and I don't want to abandon this home, this fish, so I'm just gonna take care of it. And I did that for a few months. And again, when you have an attachment or intention in something and it's gone, in this case, my fish died, it's going to affect you. But even with friendships, even with relationships, whenever I've walked away from a friendship or a relationship, they're still alive, but it's like there's that grieving process. Like, yes, you go through a divorce and you have some time to get it together, and a lot of times you don't even want to deal with it, or you're dating somebody for a few years and it ends, so it's like it hits you. What about with friendships? Are, for some reason, as important as friendships are, like I said, they're not given the same respect and I guess attention or gravity that a romantic relationship would have. And in my opinion, friendships are they're literally the blueprint for a lot of your relationships, right? And I was just thinking about that. I was like, when we don't, like, in some cases, yes, you may get sad. And I think there's a layer to that too. Like when a relationship ends, right? Or just say an exchange with another person. When I say relationship, I mean romantic relationship in this moment. But typically when I say relationships, I mean all relationships. But let's say a relationship ends and you're sad about it. Are you, this is important to ask yourself, am I sad that the relationship ended, or am I mourning my expectations of what the relationship should have been? Am I mourning the expectations and the standards that I held this person to? Because a lot of times you hear somebody say, yeah, they just kept disappointing me, or they kept doing this thing, or things just kept happening. So whenever somebody keeps doing something and that's your narrative, like you say, this person just keeps doing this thing, or they kept doing this thing, That means that they were consistent, right? And sometimes we stick around in the hopes that the other person eventually changes to meet our needs. And when it doesn't happen, there's a lot of disappointment there. But we keep it going, you know. Um, you have to allow space. You have to allow access for somebody to repeatedly disappoint you. They need access to you to be able to do that. Remember that, right? So when we talk about, oh yeah, this person keeps letting me down, or this keeps happening, so on and so forth, they keep doing it because you keep giving them access. But them continuing to do something indicates that they're very consistent. So they've shown you who they are, right? It's up to you to decide. Excuse me. It's up to you to decide what to do with that information, because it is information. Does that make sense? And when we talk about, you know, jumping back over to friendships, when you talk about a friendship ending, it hits, you know, it does hit, and it does affect you. I don't care what nobody says. And it doesn't matter what your gender is, sex, or if you care about somebody enough and you, either they end the friendship or you decide that you're in the friendship, it's going to hit. It's going to affect you. And that's okay. Why pretend that it doesn't bother you if you spent all this time investing in it? Like, it's such a contradiction. This thing just automatically doesn't matter to you now? No. Because if that's how you treat it, then that means you never, it never meant anything. It never held value. It is okay to recognize that something was important to you, even if it's no longer in the same space, even if it no longer holds the same space in your life. You know, um, you know, when you think about a ghost, right? A ghost has, the theory is that, you know, a lot of times ghosts, they linger because they have unfinished business. Your emotions could do that too if you don't process them. They linger and they come into new relationships, and they show up as something else sometimes, or the repetitive thing. So give up the ghost, and the way you do that is acknowledge and you mourn. Like, you give yourself some space to grieve. Giving yourself space to grieve. Like, you don't have to necessarily grieve them like they're dead. You know, some people do that, but it's okay to just be like, you know what? This friendship meant a lot to me, or this whatever ship meant a lot to me. I no longer have it. I know they're out there. I'm here. It sucks. But I'm acknowledging that this mattered. And the reason why you acknowledge things that matter to you instead of brushing them off and pretending that they don't, because you don't leave yourself in this emotional limbo. You know, you try to trick your mind into thinking that this doesn't matter, but your heart and your insides feel it. So now there's just like this emotional confusion, and there's a stagnancy, you know. That's the importance of emotional growth, is like there's emotional turmoil sometimes too that you need to go through so you can grow. Being aware of why you feel things, there's so much power behind it, because you can have a proper conversation even before the, you know, relationship ends. You can say, hey, this affected me, this bothered me, because, you know, that's the end goal, is like healthy communication with yourself, like being able to talk things through with yourself and identify what's going on is so useful and impactful, because when you have a conversation with somebody else about what's affecting you, you can identify it. You know, and I think that's the important part of grieving and mourning relationships when they end, is because you can identify what happened. You can identify what's going on. And it's not a good or bad kind of thing. It's not always about good or bad, right? It's just about being able to identify and acquire information in terms of what's going on. Or when you lose a pet or a plant, identifying that this thing matters. This matters to me. And when you realize what matters to you, again, that's information because you understand what works for you and what does not, and you can be a little bit more aware of just things around you. What matters, what does not. Why does it matter? Doing that work, this is all. And I didn't want this to be like a Debbie Downer episode, but just like practical information. When a relationship affects you or when something hits you, give it your attention. It doesn't need to be constant. Like, I'm not saying like dwell on it for the next decade. I'm just saying in the moment, give something your attention so you can move past it. Because the truth of the matter is if you don't move past it, it's going to move with you. It's going to move with you through life. And you already have enough things in that bag of yours that you're carrying around. And this doesn't necessarily have to be one more thing, last month for me was just a lot of things to process and just be aware of. And even sometimes I tell myself, I'm like, I don't have time to feel this. I'm good. I don't want to deal with this right now. And you know what happens is it comes up in other ways throughout the rest of my day, my week, my month. If I don't identify it, that's why I give myself the space to identify what's going on with me. And sometimes I say it out loud because it's important. And I need to grow past this, not just move past it in the physical. Is like, I need to emotionally grow through this moment. I deserve to emotionally grow through this moment. How about that? I don't feel that we always give ourselves permission to feel things because we think that it's not acceptable or it seems ridiculous or this shouldn't matter so much, but let it matter. If it matters to you, then it matters. It doesn't have to matter to somebody else. Not for you to feel it, obviously. It does not matter if it doesn't matter to someone else. It only matters if it matters to you, right? And again, when these connections that you have in or they go sideways, it's going to hit, especially if you value them. And it's okay. But the only way you can get past it and get through it is if you recognize, all right, this mattered to me. There's this quote that says, it's okay to mourn somebody not being the one, but don't mourn them as if they were. And sometimes that's interesting too, is like we give, again, when it comes to recognizing, am I upset that my expectations were not met? Or, am I upset about the actual relationship in itself? Was this relationship invaluable to me and it ended? Or my expectations, were my expectations the things that were clouding me from seeing who this person actually was, and now I'm upset and I feel let down, I'm sad, I'm in despair, and it's my expectations. And it's my expectations that are affecting me. Even that's important too. Identifying if it's your expectations or the actual relationship. Sometimes we're disappointed by our expectations. That's usually in the relationship. And that affects us. I know people are always like, yeah, I don't have expectations. Like I said, I don't know how to do that. And I don't think most people know how to do that. It's easier to say to not have any expectations when you're not invested. Because I think at the end of the day, everybody has expectations. One person has expectations in the hopes of somebody being something. The other person doesn't expect to be held accountable. So there's expectations on both sides. And also when a friendship ends or a relationship in any kind, I saw this amazing quote is like, I'm not walking away from you to teach you a lesson. I'm walking away because I've learned my lesson. And that right there is so important to recognize. It's not always about hurting the other person. It's like, I don't want to continue this pattern. And that's growth, guys. And when you walk away from a relationship that you didn't necessarily want to walk away from, you have to give yourself grieving process. You have to give yourself that space, because it's kind of a premature ending in a lot of ways. Like, you didn't expect to have to end this. And a lot of times you don't want to end it, but you have to. And that's painful. And you deserve to acknowledge that and take your time. Does that make sense? Like I said, mindfulness and just being aware of things, I feel, goes a long way. And that's all you have to do is just acknowledge, give yourself the acknowledgement. You should be Gucci. But like I said, if you don't address things, they will show up in your life later, dressed up as something or someone else. I promise you. So get in the habit of giving yourself the space. If you lose something that was important to you, grieve that. If a friendship ends, or you have to kind of reconfigure the friendship because you feel like you're not taken care of, grieve that. If you have a pet or something that passes, grieve that. Relationship with your family member ends, grieve that. Break up, grieve that. Give yourself this space, okay? And I promise you, you will heal. So yeah, that's all I got. I didn't expect this episode to be as long as it was, and I hope it made sense for you guys. I hope you got the gist of what I was saying. But yeah, just something I was thinking about. So wanted to bring it to the nest and chat about it. So I hope you guys have an amazing week, and I hope you guys are taking care of yourselves in the best way possible and just taking your time. Okay, just do your thing, and whatever you need to feel better, do that. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. And take flight.